Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tom's Hardware Podcast for May 25th, 2021. As always, I'm Tom's Hardware Editor-in-Chief, Abram Pilch, and I am joined by Associate Editor Les Pounder with the awesome headgear, Raspberry Pi expert Ash Puckett, and our very special guest, Nicholas Tollervey. Did I pronounce that right?
No, but don't
Okay,
worry
I'm sorry.
about it. I'm used to it.
No, that's not okay. How do you pronounce your last name?
Tollervey.
Nicholas Tollervey,
That's it.
developer of Code with Mu, uh, which is, as many of us know, one of the leading Python IDEs. So, Nicholas, thank you so much for joining us. For those who aren't familiar with it, could you talk a bit about Code with Mu and how long it's been around and why you started it?
Sure. Mu, the editor Mu, the website is codewith.mu. So Mu, the editor, was or is part of the Python Software Foundation's contribution to the microbit project. Myself and Damien, the MicroPython creator, collaborated on that. We created a lot of the Python-related work for that. And we found that when we were trialing the browser-based Python editor with teachers, they were finding it difficult to work with. So what I did one Sunday afternoon, I asked myself, how hard can this be? And within an afternoon, I had a very, very simple editor. That allowed people to very quickly write MicroPython code on the microbit and get the code onto the microbit without having to drag the thing, blah, 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 all the other stuff. And it also gave them a very quick way of getting to the MicroPython REPL as well, the read, evaluate, print, loop prompt that you can get on the device. So you can actually have live code running. You can work with live code running on the device as well. So that was released as open source software, and it's sort of grown from there. So my goofy how hard can it be on a Sunday afternoon type hack has turned into this editor, which is, I guess, the thing it's known for is that we focus on it being a beginner's editor. So we like to think that people don't spend that long using Mu if we're doing our job properly, because they'll start with Mu, everything's kind of friendly and helpful and simple, and then after a few months they'll feel confident, the training wheels can come off, as it were, and they can graduate to a real IDE, Visual Studio Code or PyCharm or whatever else it is that they might be using. So that's Mu in a nutshell.
So, how would you compare Mu to Thonny?
I think they are quite close, but they're orthogonal in what they do. I think Thonny is aimed more at older learners. We try and think of Mu as being something that your average 11-year-old could use, whereas Thonny is, the guy who writes Thonny, I think, is a university professor. So his beginner programmers are going to be university level students, whereas Mu is, I'd like to think it's for beginners of all ages, but we especially focus on school age children. And we also spend an awful lot of time working with teachers and other people who support learners who are younger, so that we get to learn what bumps in the road they get as they are trying to teach as well. So Mu, in a sense, is also a presentation tool as well. There are certain features in Mu, such as the Zoom feature, which teachers who are presenting with projectors and things find really, really very useful. So I think we're the same but different, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, totally. My son, who's 9 now, but has been programming Python since he was 7 or 8, uses both. He uses Mu, especially because his microbit, I think they recommended Mu, so he uses Mu a lot for microbit. But then when he's doing stuff on Raspberry Pi, he's probably using Thonny more.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think Thonny is actually in the I was going to call it Raspbian, but it's no longer Raspbian. But you know what I mean.
Raspberry
It's in the
Pi,
Raspbian
yeah.
image by default because it's a smaller size because it's a GTK based app, whereas Mu is based on Qt5, which if that were to be included in the Raspbian image would make it a whole lot bigger because you need the whole of the Qt framework as well. So, but you can easily apt-get install Mu as well.
Yeah.
It's in the repositories for Raspberry Pi.
So what are some of the things that you feel like, so once someone's graduated from you, what do you think the next best step is?
Well, we have a section on that on our website, saying goodbye to Mu. What I wouldn't say is things like Emacs or VI or something like that. What we try and do with Mu, it's a modal editor. So in a sense, it's similar to VI in that depending on what mode you're in, it tells you what buttons you're going to see. So if you're in Python 3 mode, you'll see a graphical debugger and things like that. And that's not the same as if, say, you're in a Circuit Python mode where you've got kind of like Adafruit board related buttons as well. So what we try and do in Mu is make sure that what we present to people is the real thing. So you have actually got a real graphical debugger, but it's a simple version of that. It's the training wheels version, as it were. So that when you do graduate to a, for want of a better word, proper IDE, when you first encounter the graphical debugger in, say, Visual Studio Code, it no longer looks like a 747 flight deck with buttons everywhere. You're actually quite familiar with the processes and the names of the things. We use the same names so people are introduced to kind of concepts that programmers use and talk about when, put the breakpoint here sort of thing. So that we use the same sort of thing. We're introducing this sort of terminology so that, they could go to Visual Studio Code or PyCharm or any other kind of modern IDE, and it should no longer look intimidating. It should be recognizable, and you should be going, yes, they've got a debugger like Mu has, but there are bells and whistles and all these other things, so that it helps them to spread their wings. Okay, it's a bit like, I don't know. Well, I don't know about you. When I was learning to ride a bike, I really literally did have, we call them stabilizers here in the UK, training wheels. Yeah. I mean, you'd be a very cruel parent to just stick your kid on a bike and push them down the hill, wouldn't you? So, Mu is that sort of intermediate stage that gets you to the confidence that you can pedal away and do the things you want to do with the right sorts of tools.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's definitely, we need a friendly interface because obviously Python is a text-based language, and as it is, we're asking kids to move on from a block-based language to a text-based language, which I'm always in favor of moving on from the block-based because that's not what real grown-ups use. So this is it's definitely very user-friendly and very, very helpful, and it's a great thing for the community to help people. So Red Cat asks, are there any advanced IDEs that are lightweight and fast? So I guess again, that's a question of what do you like to use?
Okay, so this is like asking what sort of music are you into? I might say I like classical, and Les is obviously a jazz man. Clearly, you can tell by the goggles, you see. So it's more a question of taste, I guess. Because I'm old, relatively speaking, I use Vim for programming, and that is a lightweight, very powerful programming environment for Python. But I wouldn't recommend it for beginners because the learning curve is like that, really. And the only reason I use Vim or VI variants is because when I was at university, that's the only thing we had on the Unix system that we would log into. So you kind of had to use it to make things work. I think, the IDE I've been most impressed with won't surprise anybody, and that's Visual Studio Code. It's just so easy and it's nice and simple. And I know they're doing really amazing things as well with it. So if I were in a class and somebody were to say, well, I finished with Mu, what should I do next? Visual Studio Code is usually at the top of my list. And I use that regularly when I'm a professional software developer. So when I'm working with my colleagues and we're pair programming, which is something I do a lot, rather than watching my colleagues struggle with VI key bindings or Emacs key bindings, if they're an Emacs user or whatever else it is, we all kind of swarm onto Visual Studio Code because it's a kind of a lingua franca that we can all use as an editor. So that's the one I would recommend at the moment. But, in 3 years' time, who knows? It's a kind of an arms race, really, of editors. There's some really good and strong technology out there. So, follow your nose. It's like saying, what music should I listen to? I don't know. Yeah. Knock yourself out.
What do you like? Well, I use Sublime Text.
Yeah.
Whoa, that's a good one. I'm getting feedback of the audio. Excuse me. Right, I used Sublime Text for years, and I thought that was the bee's knees. It was fantastic. And then Visual Studio Code came out, and I thought, I'll give this a try, mainly because it was free. And had a go, had a play, and yeah, now I use it all the time. About 80% of my projects are written in Visual Studio Code, no matter what language it is, even Arduino, Platform IO. Brilliant, great fun.
Yeah, they have a great ecosystem of plugins and things, so you can use whatever language you're into. And I want to make sure, I know Mu is a Python-specific IDE, but I'm kind of language agnostic. I write in several languages as a professional developer, so if you've got an IDE that will let you right, I don't know, if you're a web developer, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, whatever it is that you're into, knock yourself out. It's fun.
Yeah.
It can, yes. So Redcat 888 says Visual Studio uses a lot of resources. It can be kind of heavy. I will say I don't think it's good for Python because it doesn't have a REPL in it. If there was a way to get a REPL in it, maybe there's a plugin I don't know about. I love
there is a REPL in it. Yeah.
No. The thing that my favorite IDE, or I don't know if you would call it an IDE, Notepad++ for the PC is my absolutely favorite programming tool. But since it doesn't have a REPL in it, I can't use it for Python. But for other languages, JavaScript, PHP. Stuff like that I'm doing all the time, I absolutely use that one.
There's one other thing that's just becoming a kind of a ping on my developer radar, and that is IDEs in the browser. So if you've got a relatively up-to-date browser, Chrome or Firefox, I know I'm trying to remember what GitHub call them, something like code spaces, but essentially your GitHub repository is your file system, and Visual Studio Code or something that looks very like it is running in your browser, and then you can sort of edit and so on and so forth. And so this is kind of editing in the cloud. I've not used it yet because it's in closed beta, but when I get my hands on it, what I want to do is see, I've got devices all over my desk here. It looks like what's by your shoulder there, Avram. But if I want to plug in a microbit, okay, and see if I can get a REPL on that, and because it's in a browser, I'm not sure because browsers have permission issues and things like that. So it remains to be seen whether it's going to be good for embedded development, MicroPython, that sort of thing. But that's another way of getting an editor for free, if you see what I mean. It's coming soon.
Yeah, no doubt. Since we're talking about code editors, I'm curious what you think of the Arduino IDE.
So it's been a few years since I've used Arduino because I've been concentrating so much on MicroPython. So are you meaning the very, very latest cutting edge one or the classic one that I've used many, many years ago?
Well, I don't think it's that different.
Right. Okay. You see, the thing is, I've chatted to some of the folks at Arduino about editors and education and things, and we we're aware of each other and we swap stories and we chat and we're friendly and things like that. And that's one of the wonderful things that I like about this community, is that there are often very supportive people, very open people. It's an open source type vibe that's in this project. And I love that. And the fact that it's not, there's no walls or silos put in the way. You know, people are looking at what each other are doing and just, you know, sharing ideas, taking the good stuff and building on it.
It's like an open source community.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Ash. You know, it's
Yeah.
this is what you want in an open source community, is people to be supportive, to recognize each other, and to, you know, support each other. You know, say hello, be friendly. It's not that hard to do, you know.
Definitely.
So speaking of the Arduino IDE and open source people being supportive of each other, Les and I both have a new toy. I've had mine a couple days longer than him, and this is the here, we'll zoom in on yours. It's not connected to anything. This is
Looking good.
the Arduino Nano RP2040 Connect, which is, I would hazard to say, the most anticipated RP2040 board, because it has built-in Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, which others do not. So all the other boards, you have to add it, and not necessarily easily. So here we have it built in. Now, this just came out last week, and what I have to say is, since Arduino came out with it, I think the initial expectation was you would program this, which you can, in the Arduino IDE. And I had such a hard time getting it working in that because there was almost no documentation for it. There's like a spec sheet and no real documentation for it. It didn't work in the browser-based IDE, even though it's supposed to. I downloaded the offline IDE and it works, but that thing is very unstable. It locks up a lot. But the open source heroes who are behind CircuitPython were working over the weekend, specifically Liz Clark, who goes by the name Blitz City DIY, submitted code to have this work in CircuitPython over the weekend. She was kind enough to share the code with me, and it's now been, I think, made part of the official CircuitPython repository within like 3 days, and it works great in CircuitPython. I mean, it also works in Arduino IDE, but man, with CircuitPython, you could use Mu or you could use Thonny, which means you don't have to spend 5 minutes uploading the code, having it compile and upload the code. I mean, it's just shocking to me how slow the Arduino IDE is. Like, to upload a tiny file might take like 2 or 3 minutes over USB is ridiculous. But, you know, to show you an example of what this can do, they got the Wi-Fi working on this. So I'm actually going to show you here on my screen with, I have to admit, I have this running in Thonny, but, you know, it could be done in it could be done in Mu. So here we have a Wi-Fi script that gets the current value of Dogecoin. And I won't take credit of the script. This is one that Liz Clark sent me. So if I hit run, you'll see that it connects to my access point here because I have my information in the secrets.py file. And now it's going to tell me that the price is 34.3423 at this time in US dollars, all that stuff. The point is, it got information off of the internet, and it gave it to me.
That's cool.
Now, to be fair to Arduino, they had a great example in the Arduino IDE that I will have to pull up that actually allows you to set up a web server of sorts, where that works a lot like Flask. I would love to actually have it be able to actually run Flask. I don't know if that's possible in CircuitPython or MicroPython to run a Flask-like web server. But if you look at Can you?
You can certainly serve web pages. Yes, dynamic web pages from MicroPython.
Yes. So, so here for the RP2040 examples that they have, and this is the Arduino IDE. I got to give them this. They give you examples. So if you go to the examples menu here, and you go to, so like here's examples, and then there's, I think it's, no, it's actually under Wi-Fi Nina.
Wi-Fi Nina.
Do you know what? You are beautifully demonstrating why Mu doesn't have examples.
Right. It's so
because
hard.
A, you can never find the one that you want, okay, and B, it's never perhaps the example that you want. Different teachers want different examples to use in their lessons. And finally, you know, I was a child of the 80s. I had to type all my code in by hand from the back pages of, you know, very old computer magazines. And I learned such a lot by doing that, you know, I don't want to inflict pain on people, but, you know, rather than just cut and paste, I know people make jokes about Stack Overflow is just, that's all programmers do is cut and paste from Stack Overflow all day. But, you know, it's good to actually write code and think and have the code in your fingers rather than in your paste.
Absolutely. Absolutely, especially because they don't necessarily explain the code very well. But here was one that it comes with where actually you would create a web server, and then you could have it do something like activate a light or whatever. What my son and I would like to do with this, and we'd like to do it in CircuitPython if possible, is we'd like to figure out how we can actually use it to run the motors on a web page, to run the motors on a robot, which we have done very successfully with Flask on regular Python before. So that's the goal. So documentation issues aside, I got to give some credit for the hardware here. I mean, you've got built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. It's still not clear to me, and it seems likely that it doesn't seem like it's going to support BLE pairing though, as some of the other things also do not support BLE pairing in CircuitPython. So we'll have to see about that, because we also have ambitions of using it as an HID device. But it's great that they put the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on it. The thing that is a real downer on it is this is the most expensive RP2040 board at $25, and I guess because they wanted to be consistent, or because they wanted to save money, they used micro USB instead of USB-C. Like, come on, you could spare making the most expensive board. You could spare a few quid or something to give you the full USB-C experience here, like some less expensive boards do. But credit to Arduino for being the first to actually have that stuff built onto the board. What you're going to see from us very soon is our list of the best RP2040 boards, because there are so many out there. Unless you've been playing with a bunch of new stuff. What do you have? Actually, I need
that's just RP2040 stuff as well.
I'm not even joking. Box to store all of mine. Because I lost my QT Py the other day and couldn't find it. So
that's the problem. They're so small.
So what do you have under your hat?
Hopefully some brains, but maybe not. If you're wondering why I'm wearing this rather fetching hat, it's a present from Nicholas 3 years ago at PyCon in the US. I was awarded with it. There are photographs on the internet, but now you've got full video of me wearing it. I've been playing with some toys now. I did have an elaborate demo set up for tonight, as I normally do, with overhead cameras and different shots and all that sort of thing. And then 5 minutes before the show started, it all went wrong. Great. So I'm doing this old school, and I'm just going to show you it to the camera. So I've got in front of me, and do this very carefully, there's so many wires now, Arduino, which right now looks like a Compute Module 4, but forget about that, what's there. It's what's around it. So this is Arduino, and it's an Arduino Uno Leonardo type layout, but it's a Compute Module 4 carrier board. And it's created by Timon, who's been a guest on the show back end of last year it would have been. And it's a carrier board that provides lots of breakouts for different connections. So in this case, I've got standard GPIO with the Arduino layout here. It's going to move out of the way. You don't get a full 40 GPIO pins, but you get plenty to play around with. You get a Stemma QT interface or quick interface for SparkFun. I'm just going to take that out now so it's out of the way. You get a single USB port. It's USB 2, USB-C, full-size HDMI, which was going to my capture card, but now it's failed, and something rather fetching on the bottom. Those of you with cracking eyesight can see that's an NVMe drive. So this Raspberry Pi boots from NVMe natively. There's no micro USB. It has got micro USB slots underneath the compute module board. Sorry, I'm always off shot here, aren't I? Just there. But it doesn't need it. So this is Compute Module 4 Lite, 8 gig with Wi-Fi, and it boots up within 15 seconds. It's fantastic. So I've been playing around with this all day Saturday. I spent 7 hours messing around with it. So the basic stuff, using GPIO 0 to make things, turn LEDs on and off and make motors spin with a motor driver. Attaching the Raspberry Pi camera, the official camera, which I have here on a new cable, to it, and taking pictures of myself, which is never a good thing. And also messing around with that Stemma QT connection. That Stemma QT, or quick connection for SparkFun fans. And I've been plugging in my usual demo board, which is the NPR 121, is it? Yeah, NPR 121, which is the breakout for the capacitive touch. If you've watched one of the episodes a few weeks back, I connected it to a banana, and you can see I was turning lights on and off with a banana. And I'm running on here Raspberry Pi OS, but also CircuitPython using the Blinker library. So I can write CircuitPython code on this board to control the GPIO pins, to control the Stemma devices that are attached to it, as if it was just another microcontroller board like an RP2040. I have to say, I rather like this. And I can say I've actually put money towards this. This is a beta board provided we have a read through and check, and also to give feedback. But I have put my money in this as well. So I'll be getting one of the final boards when it finally comes out. But for the money, cracking little board.
How fast does it boot?
About 15 seconds. A typical Pi 4 micro SD boot is about 20 seconds if you've got a decent micro SD card, not top of the range. Now, the reason why there's a slow boot at the start is because the board is saying, what am I booting from? It's almost like a BIOS. What is my boot device? And it sort of hangs for a few seconds and goes, right, NVMe, then goes for it.
Right. So I guess if there was a way of hacking the firmware, one could get slightly faster boot times.
Yeah, the NVMe boot is still beta, from what I remember. And I had to do quite a bit of digging around. In fact, I got it wrong twice while I was doing it, which was great. I learned a lot about how it boots by doing that.
I appreciate the form factor, though. That performance and that size, you can't really beat that. It's pretty good.
It's a nice form factor. Yeah, so I had a slew of things on my desk to show off as well. So that's the, which one was it? The source kit. Yeah, Pi Tray Mini, which is a Raspberry Pi 4 sort of layout, almost. We've reviewed that on Tom's Hardware. So that's, yeah, it's a little bit bigger. And then we've got the big one, which is the official board. Try and get this both in shot. Hey, it's like I'm on the shopping channel. There you go. There, you can see you both there. So it's tiny compared to that. And then we've got this new one, which I've not had time to play with yet, but I'm going to be doing soon, which is Seed's breakout board. Let's try and hold this in a better way. So this has dual gigabit Ethernet, USB 3 camera connections, and the Compute Module 4, there it is, connection. So you can see it's a really tiny layout. So I'm quite enjoying messing around beta testing this board to see what it can do and what feedback I can give to T-Bon, because he's done an excellent job with it. Really has.
So what would you recommend for someone who is looking to farm chia? Would you recommend they use a CM4 with a carrier board over a regular Raspberry Pi 4?
Yes and no. So there are caveats for both. If you've got a CM4, so you had something like one of the clusters that you can build these days, the Turing Pi, I think it was. You've got something like that, then you've got the infrastructure to build something really big, and you've got the cooling as well. Right now, the downside of this form factor, there's no cooling for the CPU. Now, obviously, Raspberry Pi CPU doesn't really need cooling unless you're pushing it a bit too far. This is running at 1.5 gig. But I've got no way to sort of attach cooling to it. With a Raspberry Pi, I could put on a cooling hat or something like that, or the fan shim from Pimoroni. I think, and I'm leaning towards this because it's got USB 3, this could be a bit of an interesting one for Chia, because CM4 goes on there, and I can plug in 2 USB hard drives straight away here. There you go, you can see it.
Right.
And I haven't got to mess around with, having USB hubs on here. This isn't meant for mining Chia. This is meant for playing around with and making stuff. This is a networking device from Seed. Let's hold it right way up. There we go. I'm sat from the shopping channel. So this is meant for plugging in network devices and doing something serious with for your home. So sharing video around your home, mining Chia, or whatever the latest crypto is going to be next week.
Indeed. I just want to throw in the pitch there that folks, anyone who's interested in farming Chia, check out Les's article on how to farm Chia on your Raspberry Pi, since that's a new thing. People plotting Chia coin on their PC and then taking the drives and attaching them to your Raspberry Pi for low power farming, since it just has to be connected. So speaking of new things you can do on your Raspberry Pi, Ash, you've been running a new operating system, correct?
Yes. So, I mean, we all love Raspberry Pi OS, formerly Raspbian here, but every now and then you want to do something a little bit different with your Raspberry Pi. So what I've done today to show off is set up Manjaro.
Ash, you're muted.
How about that? Is that better?
Yep.
Okay, good deal. So what I wanted to show off to you guys today is Manjaro. I was able to set up Manjaro on the Raspberry Pi. If you're not familiar, that's a Linux distribution. It's known for its user-friendly interface. It comes with a KDE. Let me switch over here to my screen. I can pull this up. So you can find a Manjaro ARM distribution on the Manjaro website. It's under Additions, ARM, and then Raspberry Pi 4. And for those who can't see, I have a screenshot of the website open, and they actually have a few other distributions as well for additional boards, not just the Raspberry Pi, but also Odroid. There's also the Rock Pi. So if you wanted to check some of those out, maybe you have a few extra boards lying around, you could probably run Manjaro on it. So right behind me here, I actually have Manjaro running on a 3D Plus. So even though the website says...
You muted again.
I'm sorry. Behind me, I have a computer. I'm sorry. Behind me, I have a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus running Manjaro. So even though the website says that it's only for the Raspberry Pi 4, I was able to successfully get it up and running on the machine behind me. But I think my camera's frozen, so you can't quite see me use it in real time. But it's a full-blown operating system. Things install through terminal, but there's also an application you can use to find things. I'm sorry. If you've used Manjaro before, you'll be familiar with the application manager. It has its own application manager that you can use to get packages. There's a few different VNC distributions. I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and pass it back to you.
Manjaro is a great OS. I've used it for a few years on a battered ThinkPad X220, and it still runs like lightning. It's also got the best keyboard in the world. Okay, that's what I'm saying. But yeah, Manjaro, brilliant OS. I've used it on a Pi as well, and
Looks
really
like
good.
Nicholas likes his Manjaro also.
X220, it's the classic.
You like your ThinkPad?
Yeah.
I have a ThinkPad to my left with Manjaro on it. That's great.
I can't
There you
blame
go.
I can't blame you there. I could almost as easily run a ThinkPad show. I don't think it is exciting with the developments every week, but yeah, I've done a lot of I have used a lot of ThinkPads in my time. Yes, X220. I used that. I found that completely off topic note. I found that the I didn't like the keyboard deck on it because my wrist would hang off the edge of that one, because they had I think it was still I think it was like the 200, 210, and 220 or whatever, still had a very narrow keyboard deck, and then it got a little better.
Yeah.
Around
Yeah.
my ThinkPad from that era.
I mean, what a bunch of nerds we are. The fact that we've got our old computers right next to our desks. I mean, this is so funny.
Exactly.
I have got about 4 or 5 laptops under this desk.
It seems heavy now compared to what it was. But this, who that is watching or among us can name what ThinkPad this is? Ooh, dusty, because I don't even know if it boots anymore. But it's such a classic. I just couldn't bear to get rid of it.
260?
No, this is a 301. This is an X301.
Yeah, I'm using a 390 at the moment to do this.
Same here.
Yes, this is not my daily driver laptop. My daily driver laptop is an X1 Carbon, which is the spiritual successor to that. But
They're just so modular. They're really good laptops.
But
they're very easy to repair as well.
If you put Manjaro on, you're giving it a second lease of life because it's so lightweight. It's lovely OS.
On the subject, you can I was able to put Manjaro on my old Chromebook. So if you have one of those lying around and it's frustrating you to turn it on and do nothing with, put Manjaro on it. You can actually use it.
So would you recommend Manjaro over Ubuntu for folks?
I personally do, but it's because Ubuntu is only updated about every 6 months, and Manjaro is updated on a more regular basis. But there's pros and cons to both.
I think with Ubuntu, you've got more resources to look for. If you go on Google and type in Ubuntu, how do I do this command in the terminal? Bam, you're going to get the answers.
It's been around for so long. You do have that community.
Great. Well, it was an interesting conversation because you really can't talk about Raspberry Pi without talking about Linux. I mean, yes, we have put Windows on it, but you really wouldn't want to.
Yeah, done that.
Yes,
you can put Android on it.
Tractor down a motorway, isn't it?
Yes,
but it has improved. It's got USB boot now for external USB hard drives, so it's better than what it was.
There you go. We have to update our How to Run Windows on Raspberry Pi article.
We did,
but I want to thank Nicholas for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us and for everything that you do. And thanks to everyone who's listening or watching. As always, you find us here at 7:30 p.m. UK time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesdays. And we will see you next week. Bye, everyone.